They ran this Operation Prosperity Guardian in the Red Sea, trying to defeat the Ansar Allah in Yemen. They failed. Then they launched Operation Rough Rider on the 15th March this year, which Trump announced as now they're going to bomb them like nobody's ever seen before. That didn't work out either. And Iran is no Ansar Allah, and Iran is no Taliban. Iran is a regional power that has not only prepared for this clash against the empire for more than 20 years. They also have support from Pakistan, from Russia, from China, and from other players in the region. United States can bring their carrier strike groups and their destroyers, but everybody knows now that they have limited assets on those, limited ammunition, limited number of missiles on those ships. Once they fire them off, then what? They have to leave the region and refuel and resupply themselves somewhere else in port. Once they run out of missiles and out of air defense missiles, they're sitting ducks. They're absolutely lame sitting ducks in the middle of the sea. And if they stay there, the Iranians will 100% sink them. There's no doubt about that. I would be surprised, and various charitable organizations. And then they do charitable work, and they certain cultural events, they sponsor cultural events, they sponsor the media, and they use this front to develop a very widespread intelligence network. And they take time to learn exactly where the right pressure nodes are in the society that they can influence, where they can obtain information, where they can bribe someone, when they sense who in the society has a friendly disposition to them, who is unhappy with the regime. And then very often, these people don't necessarily even know that they are working for, ultimately, MI6 and the British Foreign Office. They think that they're working with these helpful Westerners who want to bring progress, women's rights, or whatever. And so they cooperate and provide information that the intelligence services then can reconstruct into effectively actionable information for them. And this is something that the British have perfected now for centuries, this type of intelligence work, and they're very effective in it. I think that indirectly they do have considerable influence, because you can't not notice when people who were otherwise supportive of you start turning away from you, start giving public statements to that effect and expressing their dissatisfaction openly and overtly, which is all the more surprising why Trump is behaving the way he is behaving. It's completely at odds with pretty much everything he's been saying ever since he entered politics in the United States. It's hard to explain this turn of events, but there's got to be some kind of an explanation. And I think that Tulsi Gabbard also said that if the United States joins the war against Iran, that she will resign. And I am certain that there's a lot of dissent in the military circles, in the Pentagon, not to mention the sailors aboard these carrier strike groups who might all find themselves at the bottom of the sea if the United States attacks Iran. So they must be thinking, are we being used as pawns in this game? It's so staggeringly idiotic. It makes no sense whatsoever. I think that something else must be going on. At the same time, the Iranians have developed precision-guided hypersonic missiles, which can inflict the same damage as a nuclear weapon, but on a precisely chosen target. So you can take out, let's say, the headquarters of the Mossad without killing a lot of civilians in the city, which is what the Iranians have done now. You can destroy an oil refinery, you can destroy a port, you can destroy an airport. You don't need to kill millions of innocent people. And so I think that this whole saber rattling with nuclear weapons is more serving as a negotiating leverage. And I think that the Iranians themselves they very intelligently made the proposal to say, okay, we will limit our nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment program to 3.6 to 3, whatever it is, % for only civilian uses. But we demand that Israel's nuclear warheads also be dismantled and destroyed. So that's a perfectly reasonable position. And I think that everybody in the world would welcome it, because that would actually improve the stability and peace in the region. But nobody is going for that. And Erdogan's phony fulminating against Israel while he is supplying them oil, while he's helped the Israeli by overthrowing Bashar al-Assad, which was a massive score for the Israeli, and by helping Western powers take down Iranian missiles launched at Israel. His whole shtick is wearing thin, and the Turkish people could at some point rise up and overthrow his regime as well. There's very massive downside risks for the United States getting involved against Iran. And I don't quite see what they stand to gain that they couldn't gain by peaceful means. The whole story about the whole story about the Iranian nuclear program is exactly as fake and as phony as the story about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. From the very get-go, the name of the game was regime change. That's what they're after. They don't care about peace and stability in the region. Nobody's worried about Iranians having nuclear weapons, really. Iran hasn't attacked anybody since, I think, 1730s, 1740s. So for nearly 300 years, Iran never attacked any of their neighbors. On the other hand, you have Israel that has been attacking their neighbors practically nonstop since they've existed as a country. Maybe Trump doesn't appreciate that, but I would be surprised if there's anybody in the Pentagon that doesn't appreciate that. So the whole gambit that Trump is now apparently pursuing is so staggeringly idiotic that I always have to think back and say, it can't possibly be this stupid. There's got to be something else to it. I don't know. We'll find out. I have the impression that Trump very badly needs to pass his big, beautiful bill through U.S. Senate. That is coming, I think, on the 4th of July. And I think that the odds of him passing that bill through the Senate are much increased if he is running the pro-Zionist side. And I think we won't really know his true intentions until that time, or unless we see the United States actually going for an attack. But if that happens, if he orders an attack on Iran, there's going to be a mutiny in the United States. There's going to be resignations from his administration. Servicemen in U.S. military might decline to follow their orders. This is a dumb idea at every possible level. So I can't even understand that Trump is doing what he's doing. He's alienating everybody that supported him. But I think that it will fold all the way because today I'm certain that the Russians and the Chinese exactly understand this game, and they are paying very close attention to the events. And they will continue to fight the empire, because if you think that you're just going to secure like a buffer zone, take part of Ukraine, create a buffer zone to insulate yourself from Western invasions. But if you leave the empire intact and you let it regain its strength by colonizing Africa and South America and East Asia and elsewhere, they're going to just come back for you, because the Western powers in more than 300 years never stopped antagonizing Russia and trying to overthrow Russia, balkanize it into many small pieces, attack it, invade it, inflict terror attacks, sabotage, proxy wars all along the Russian southern and western border. So that's going to continue indefinitely. They never gave up and they never will. If you want peace, if you want to secure a long-lasting peace, you're going to have to figure out a way to quarantine this British imperial system. And that means that you have to disenfranchise them everywhere. And I think that if they launched a nuclear missile on Iran, that people like Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen and Lindsey Graham, all these kinds of people, would say, we call on everybody for maximum restraint, but Israel has the right to defend themselves. And everything Israel does is right and sacrosanct. And the Iranians is their own fault for getting a nuclear projectile striking at them. Anything is possible, and I hope that we pass through this crisis without seeing exchange of nuclear weapons. If tomorrow you get some kind of attack where the key people were suddenly taken out with a rocket straight through their bedroom windows, that's how that information comes to the people who pull the triggers. And Israel, as the imperial project of the British Empire since the beginning, is the beneficiary of that. We're only hearing about the incredible genius of the Mossad and how amazingly capable they are. They're capable because they have support of the whole Western intelligence network, the MI6 and the CIA and all of them. They all give their best information and best intelligence to the Israelis, and then they can just pick off who they need to pick off. But at the same time, other nations start to figure things out. And as you said, I'm certain that the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese are paying very close attention to what is happening and how it's happening. And they will be effecting countermeasures, and they will be rooting out these networks. And then the empire is going to find itself blinded again. The UN is in favor. The Iranians are in favor. All the countries in the region are in favor except for Israel. And so the whole global south, the Chinese, the Russians, Pakistanis, everybody's in favor of this solution. The United States, Great Britain, and Israel are not. So that tells you everything you want to know. They don't care about peace. They don't care about stability. They want hegemony in the region. And to have that hegemony in the region, they need a regime change, and they need a completely defanged, toothless Iran so that they can do with it whatever they please. And you know what that is? That's colonial plunder and taking 92 million Iranians and turning them into slave labor. That's their ultimate objective. And we've even learned a little bit about the way they work, because it's not like people go around with a Mossad or MI6 business card and say, hey, here's my card and I'll give you money if you give me information or work for me or so on. What they do instead is they come to the country, they bring in these NGOs. So the projection of power doesn't work anymore. Everybody has seen through it. And the US, the Western Alliance, is also failing, because you can see that even the Saudis are not so loyal anymore, and they are realizing that the game is up. So all of that is imploding. Militarily, they cannot defeat Iran. So if it goes to war, it's going to lead to very bad consequences for the West and for Israel, but it's also going to be very damaging to the region. Economic destruction, casualties, possible nuclear fallout, and so forth. So it's best avoided. But when we talk about what the game is from the Russian and Chinese side, I think it's obviously Iran is a very important node in the Belt and Road Initiative. They could defend their sovereignty against the empire and, let's say, reject the empire's diktat. And so that now is obviously Iran, but also in Russia and China. And so they created this arc of instability that it runs from the Baltic states down to the Mediterranean, the Baltic states, the Balkans, Turkey, Greece, Eastern Mediterranean, and then it runs across all the way to the Koreas from in the southern crescent of the Eurasian landmass. And the IDF themselves, IDF veteran generals and a group of defense experts in Israel produced an extensive 100-page report that they submitted to the Netanyahu government saying that going to war against Hezbollah would be suicidal. Okay, the situation has changed. They were able to assassinate the leadership of Hezbollah. They've been able to overthrow the regime in Damascus thanks to Erdogan and the Turkish deep state. And so now, at least from that point of view, they are in a, let's say, slightly less vulnerable position. But I think this problem didn't go away. They just took care of it for the time being. But everywhere, there's still bleeding losses. In Gaza, in Syria, Yemen is still lobbing a missile here and a missile there, and we don't know what might happen if a civil war breaks out in Syria. But all of those factors are risk factors for Israel. And so they've been taking increasing political control in a lot of African countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, Cameroon, and so forth. And they've been, again, developing this colonial dominance over those countries. And so that does give them a certain degree of power and wealth with which they can influence events around the world. Like already in 1992, their foreign minister, Douglas Hurd, was saying that Britain was punching above its weight, and we intend to retain this position of power. And so ever since, they've been doing this covert way of penetrating countries, getting control over the levers of power through the media, through NGOs, through corrupting local government officials, sending their special forces to defend their puppet regimes, and also where they don't have control, orchestrating regime changes and assassinations and color revolutions and all this. So in this sense, the empire is not going to just implode like a house of cards. They're going to continue, but it's the more battles they lose in Russia, in Ukraine, in Iran, and so on, the weaker they become. And so the process will take some time. You have all these flashpoints of instability that could be detonated one against the other. And they made sure that you had countries on hostile terms one against the other. Saudi Arabia versus Iran, which used to be, they're now friends, but for a long time they were enemies. Greece versus Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, North Korea, South Korea, India, Pakistan. They made sure before the British left, they made sure to partition India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. And then, so you could name a number of these flashpoints. They're everywhere. And their objective is always to keep the region, to keep the whole continent destabilized, because you cannot rule it militarily. There isn't enough troops that you could conquer the Eurasian continent and police it by force. So what you do instead is you do divide and conquer. You keep everybody at war against everybody else. So we've had a century of war basically there all the time. And so what the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians want to do is they want to change this. They want an actual security architecture so that you can have the whole continent in peace. And so they encourage these movements because it's easier to balkanize somewhere, then you can keep countries all at war against each other. Of course, if they partitioned Iran, they would definitely use one part of Iran to wage war in the other part of Iran. Then you loan each side money to be able to fight the war. You sell them weapons, and all the wealth from those countries then keeps flowing to you. It's exactly the same model that's been applied all over the world for centuries now. But I think that the world is seeing through it. I think that in the United States now, it's not just Trump. The rejection of the global empire, of the globalization, is actually quite broad-based. And so I think that even if you took Trump out or compromised him or whatever, you would still find that there's a lot of resistance in the United States to this European colonialist model of governments that they want to impose on everybody else by force. And of course, the force mainly comes from the United States. They are the ones who always have to come in and wage war and overthrow governments and bomb everybody to pieces. Israel already at the beginning of the war in Gaza, the genocide, not really the war, already then representatives of the IDF were saying, we must make sure that this doesn't become a long war. Israeli defense forces are structured for very quick, short-lasting wars. They can be effective in this, but if this drags on, it's going to exhaust us, it's going to deplete us. And so they've been at war in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, against the Houthis in Yemen for more than 2 years. No, for nearly 2 years now. So it's been more than 600 days. And so they've been bleeding ammunition, they've been bleeding air defense ammunition, they've been bleeding troops. And not only their economy has been decimated as well. And then the Iranian strikes against Israel have been very strategic. They have destroyed the headquarters of the Mossad, Ben Gurion Airport, the port in Haifa, oil refineries. So Israel has sustained very extensive damage. And so after 2 years of warfare, there's no way that Israel is in a position to take on Iran in any way, shape, or form. Even attacking Hezbollah was extremely risky for them. And all these incumbent governments are very deeply unpopular with their people. And every time the people get to exercise any degree of democracy, they want to throw these governments out. And so I think that a war would be useful to them for cohesion, for another justification to cancel democracy, a way to explain away what's happening to our healthcare system. Where's the food? Why do we have shortages of food? Why is the economy disintegrating? Where are the jobs? Why are the pensions not being paid correctly on time and so on? All of these things, if you make a big war somewhere, whether it's in the Middle East or against Russia, you can always say, oh, it's the evil Iranians. That's why we don't have jobs. We have to defend Israel, which is why you can't get an appointment with your doctor, or why there's no medicines in the pharmacies, or why there's no food on the shelves of the supermarket and so on. So you can explain all your failures away by pointing the finger at an external enemy, right? And you get a degree of social cohesion which wouldn't be there, because these governments are all so deeply unpopular that people can't wait to get rid of them. And we see that their leadership are